All right, folks, welcome as you join. This is Art Viewing Adventures. I am coming to you from the great outdoors, and I am joined by my colleague and friend, Avril Angevine, who is a guide for the Oakland Museum of California and another museum in San Francisco that we call the San Francisco Unnamed Museum of Art, SFUMA. But Avril, how are you doing today?
I'm doing just fine.
Hi, April.
Hi.
We've got Paco in the audience as always.
Paco, okay, yeah.
So Avril, you and I, we thought we would talk a little bit about something that's going to be coming up in July. You're going to be, we're doing this program on Diego Rivera, but we're going to be talking about California ceramics. And there's a pretty interesting exhibition going on at the Oakland Museum. So tell me more about that.
What that will be about? Well, the exhibit that's at Oakland right now is about the work of Edith Heath. So most of us know Heath Ceramics in Sausalito, and they have their sale room down there where you can get seconds and so forth. But Heath was a really interesting character, and the company was groundbreaking. But rather than just talk about her, the presentation I'm doing is really about the California tradition in ceramics. California, like any art subject you want to talk about, California is going to be large. And from the turn of the 20th century, the arts and crafts, art pottery movement, and then mid-century modernism, and then up until the present day, there's been a lot done in California. So Edith Heath certainly fits in there in a lot of ways. And the exhibit, I was saying to Rodney, because he's seen it, is a typical Oakland Museum exhibit in that it's not just art. I mean, there are plenty of examples of her ceramics in there, but it's science, it's history. There's a lot about where the clay comes from, and the clay comes from up in the Sierra, a place called Lincoln, right? And how she organized, she had a really kind of groundbreaking concept in their factory in Sausalito. It was built kind of in a round thing like this, and everybody who worked there had a view of the bay. She was clear about that. She wanted them to see what was outside. So it's a very interesting figure, and I recommend going to see it. And I'm going to talk about her position in the whole outlook of California ceramics pottery work, mostly in the 20th century. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. We had a very good time. Sarah and I went with our friend Karen, who's in the audience, and her husband Peter. And I really surprised me, how much there was to learn about ceramics, where the clay comes from, what the content is, where I just never really thought about it, and I found it really eye-opening.
Well, yeah, and you eat every day. You eat off dishes every day, and you wonder. But what's kind of interesting is that now, most of us get our dishes from Crate and Barrel, if not IKEA, and so when you look back and say, "Oh, this was brand new," well, now everybody does it, right? But to see where things come from actually sometimes is interesting too. Anyway, that's good. Yeah.
So we are at 1:00. So I think we're going to kick off officially Art Viewing Adventures. We've been doing this. This is actually, we're adding in our third year of doing this. So we started in May of 2020.
Wow.
Pretty cool. And Jennifer, you're our moderator. Tell us more about Community Living Campaign.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to our session on Art Viewing Adventures. Diego Rivera, Art for a New Age with Rodney Paul and others. I'm Jennifer Walsh, your Community Living Campaign tech host. A little bit about Community Living Campaign, CLC, is cultivating connections to help seniors and people with disabilities age and thrive at home as a nonprofit for over 14 years. CLC supports San Francisco residents in many ways. CLC has the Community Connector program that builds networks of neighbors and friends. The food delivery networks never stopped running throughout the pandemic. SF Reserve program matches people with project-based work. The Senior Beat reports on the news of interest to seniors. The Neighborhood Tech Connect program helps people use technologies to connect with family members. And our newest programs, the Transportation Options and Advocacy, help people find low-cost or free transportation, and lastly, our full calendar of free virtual activities like this one. I'll put the link to the virtual calendar of Zoom activities in the chat. Okay, I'll pass it to Rodney to begin our session.
Thank you, Jennifer. And I'm really proud to be affiliated with the Community Living Campaign. This is a great organization. I am joined, I'm presenting this, but I am not presenting this. I'm joined by Avril Angevine. She is a guide for the Oakland Museum of California and I think you're an art history instructor, Avril?
No, humanities, things like that, but yeah.
Okay.
And
you presented a lot of local libraries.
Yep.
And you have been on this program before, but we're really thrilled to have you back, and particularly to talk about Diego Rivera, who is a figure kind of near and dear to the hearts of many in the Bay Area.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for coming on. I'm really looking forward to the presentation.
Okay. Great. Well, thanks so much, Rodney and everybody. And let's see, I'm going to bring my screen up. I'm going to talk, if you have questions or comments during the presentation, I guess best would be to kind of put them in the chat, Rodney, or hold them, and we'll talk about them at the end. Okay, let me get my
I'll be monitoring chat, and then we'll ask your questions at the end.
Oh,
Talk to you later, Rodney.
Slideshow around the beginning. Oh, okay. So no, wrong. Wait, and show. Wait, slideshow from the beginning. That's what there, from the beginning with the title. Okay, there we go. All righty. So gonna talk today about Diego Rivera. Now, if you're kind of a typical Bay Area art lover, you probably know a lot about Frida Kahlo, who has become one of the most famous artists of the 20th century. But with, what has this done? I don't know what that is. Oh, there we go. Okay. But with the upcoming Diego Rivera's America exhibit coming to SF MoMA in July, plus the mural, Pan American Unity, that's already there, Diego may finally catch up to the fabulous Frida. So today I thought I would fill you in about the other half of this powerful artistic pair, lovers, co-conspirators, artistic power partners, and undoubtedly one of the 20th century's most important power couples. Now, in their lifetime, Diego was by far the more celebrated figure, larger than life in every way, including weighing sometimes 300 pounds. But in our time, Frida's reputation has surpassed his by tapping into a feminist consciousness that grew and really flowered by the end of the 20th century. Her works are intensely personal. As you know, many of them are self-portraits, and she has a compelling, tragic story so that we feel connected to her, rather like Vincent van Gogh in that way. Now, although Frida denied being a surrealist, she said her works reflected reality, not surreality. Her mysterious canvases, full of symbols, leave room for speculation. Now, Diego's works, on the other hand, and especially his murals, are social, political in intention, but they reflect a worldview that had kind of run its course by the century's end. They are packed with imagery, and as Frida's are baffling, his are clear. His meaning is clear. His works reflect historical and contemporary reality as he saw it. But right now, in our current moment, with resurgence of murals and other forms of street art that ask us to attend to the world around us, Rivera's art certainly has something to tell us. But in fact, Diego Rivera and the Mexican mural movement he was part of was something of an anomaly in the 20th century. Modern movements in Western art, starting with the Impressionists in the 1870s, were far more concerned with form. That is, the way they were painted, the ways objects could be depicted, what the boundaries of art might be. That was more important than content, than what actually was being depicted. As you can see here in a Picasso, a Cubist work, and a straight up abstract by Mondrian early in the century is what I mean. Now, clearly there were modern forms of art that did refer to the world around, often with outrage and angst, particularly in Dada and Expressionism. Oh my There we go. After World War I. Right, so these are responding to the world, but there was nothing that was as pointed and as direct as what Los Tres Grandes would do in Mexico. And each of the three great artists worked in the United States. They all worked in California. So from the right, David Siqueiros, Jose Clemente Orozco, and Diego Rivera. So he, as I said, the biggest, probably the most famous of the big three, was a master artist whose influence on American art, especially in San Francisco, was tremendous. And all you have to do is have a look at a couple of works that are in Coit Tower, this one by Victor Arnautoff, and one by John Langley Howard, to see how closely they adhere to the kind of work that Diego does. But let's go back to the beginning. Diego Rivera was born in 1886 in Guanajuato, in central Mexico, silver mining town. His twin brother, imagine that, there was one, died at 18 months, and the parents, fearing for little Diego's health, placed him with an indigenous wet nurse who let a goat suckle him, as he says in his autobiography. There's the goat, or a goat anyway. Rivera did brilliantly at school, and by 12 he was studying sculpture and painting at the San Carlos Academy, the oldest one in the Americas. Here's a work, an early work exhibited in his final year, his graduation show. Fairly straightforward kind of picture. Now in 1906, when he was 20, he won a scholarship to study in Europe, and he soon found himself in Madrid at the San Fernando Royal Academy, Spain's most prestigious. And once he's there, the Spanish masters, Goya, Velázquez, El Greco, whom he studied at the Prado, really influenced his style. And these Spanish paintings are by and large dark. And so he's going dark himself, right? And there's a wonderful self-portrait. And actually, here's a photograph. Does that look like a 20-year-old to you? I don't think so. He was always kind of, okay, I'm gonna move this up here. Move back to that. Okay, so that is funny. Okay, there we go. Let's see, from Madrid, he moved to Paris, where he began living the artist's life. I'm sure you don't recognize this as a kind of work by Diego Rivera, but there it is. Painting in a fairly impressionist style. He was exhibiting and living in typical Bohemian poverty and squalor. He spent 12 years in Paris, where of course he came into contact with Cubism. Picasso knew him, Picasso encouraged him, and approved of his work. So by 1913, we have works that look like this. On the right, I just absolutely love this portrait of Adolfo Best Mogar, who was a Mexican painter and filmmaker. Here he's shown on a balcony over the Gare Montparnasse, and the Ferris wheel behind is from the 1900 World's Fair. But sort of there were lots of emigre artists in Paris at this time, I guess, as there always are. And it's really interesting the way he's portrayed with this barrier of the balcony kind of behind him, separated from Paris in some ways, right? By the following year, 1914, he's being influenced by discussions on the role of art in the service of the revolution that preoccupied all of the emigre artists in Montparnasse at the time. Rivera made quite a name for himself in the movement with works like this Zapatista landscape of 1915. And if you want to see how big it is, that's how big it is. There he is standing next to it, painting with a tie on, as all good artists do. So this is interesting. It clearly is a Cubist construction, but we have, of course, the mountains around Mexico City up at the top, and the serape and the rifle. So really references to what was going on in Mexico at the time, which was the revolution. But here, by the way, is another straight up Cubist work, the Eiffel Tower, done by Diego Rivera. It's kind of fun. Now, in 1916, he marries, the first of 4 marriages. He marries a Russian painter named Angelina Belov. They have a son, Diego, who died of flu at age 2. And given the years, that was probably the Spanish flu outbreak of 1918, we're all concerned about now. This is one of his last Cubist works called Motherhood Angelina with Our Child Diego. Now, you will notice in this and also in the Zapatistas, this is a little bit unusual. Most Cubist works, here's something by Picasso, that's kind of a similar subject, a woman holding something. use of cubes is the same, but Rivera is always much more colorful. Most of the cubists didn't involve color that much, but that was him. But by 1917, he has a serious beef with Picasso and he abandons Cubism. And he starts looking instead back at Cézanne, this absolutely wonderful painting called Aqueduct. And somebody told me that this aqueduct is in Mexico. I don't know that, but it's really wonderful. And he even goes back to sort of our representational type naturalistic imagery here in this portrait of the mathematician. But despite the rapid development of his work in this decade in Paris, by the end of this time, he felt that something was missing, something was absent from his work, that Cubism somehow was inadequate. His view of the political importance of painting was strengthening, and he felt that art should be enjoyed by everyone, especially by the poor, working people, people who can't afford paintings and basically don't go in museums. He began to interest himself in the folk art and ancient masterpieces of his native land. And in 1920, he spent 17 months in Italy, where he discovered the murals of the Italian Quattrocento, the 15th century. He made over 300 sketches of murals and of other works, and in them, he found the inspiration for a new and revolutionary form of public art, capable of furthering the ideals of the revolution in his native land, which, by the way, he did not experience like the other two of Mexico's three great muralists. He was in Europe for the time, although he did return once or twice. But fired with enthusiasm, then Rivera returns to Mexico for good in 1921, divorcing his wife Angelina and leaving behind a daughter, Marika, born to yet another Russian painter. Okay, so his personal life is always interesting and complicated. His return in 1921 effects a change in his attitudes as well as his painting. And we have this wonderful quote that his style was born like a child in an instant after 35 agonizing years of pregnancy, right? So you can see in the Bather of Tehuantepec, something really different is going on. First of all, Mexican imagery, an indigenous woman and the plants and so forth, but it's a real modern style. It's not a representational work at all. So he's cool. So in the early 20s, with the armed struggle of the Mexican Revolution at an end, the post-revolutionary governments wanted to shore up the social and political changes of the revolution. And a really important figure was the Minister of Public Education, Jose Vasconcelos. That's him all the way on the left. And of course, next to him is Diego Rivera. Vasconcelos understood the importance of culture and the struggle to promote the new Mexican identity. And he began an ambitious literacy campaign throughout the country and established outdoor painting schools to encourage creativity among children, among workers, everyone. And he's the man who sent Rivera to the southern area of Tehuantepec in 1922, which was a revelation to Rivera. And most importantly, Vasconcelos wanted the state to sponsor murals on public buildings, big, bright, clearly understandable images that would be open to everyone and would illustrate for everyone the ideals of Mexicanidad, Mexicanness. And in fact, this program was the inspiration later in the United States for the WPA, and clearly it was tailor-made for Diego Rivera. So in his mural projects, as well as his many, many easel paintings, we see Rivera combining sensitivity to Mexican culture and landscape, the pride he took in his Mexican identity, and a sophisticated modern technique that he had mastered in Europe, and in works of incredible power. So Vasconcelos assigned several well-known artists, all the three great muralists, to decorate the Escuela Nacional Preparatoria, which was a prestigious Mexico City high school of 300 boys and 5 girls, one of whom was Señorita Frida Kahlo. This is where Rivera completes his first government commissioned 1,000 square foot Renaissance style mural called Creation over the course of a year, at which time Frida Kahlo apparently came around and needled him quite a bit. So the figures are 12 feet high, they're allegorical, it's kind of hard to know what's going on exactly. That's up at the top. could be the Divine Trinity, could be an Egyptian iconographic symbol of Aton, the symbol of the creative sun. So we have wisdom and science below that. Below that, we have the Christian virtues, and below them, we have the 9 muses. So it's a mixture of religious and pagan iconography. In the center section, behind the podium there, it's a little hard to see, his interest in Mexican subject matter comes across most fully. So the figure of Eve there, the model was Guadalupe Marin, whom he married in 1922. And Adam is there, and it's this luxuriant Mexican style background with the animals, the eagle, the bull. Over on the left, I see a lion. I don't know that lions are present in Mexico. Perhaps they are. That's kind of interesting. So the bright colors he uses are typical maybe of Mexican indigenous art, but Rivera himself felt that the whole thing was too Italian. And of course, it doesn't have any political or ideological tendency at this point. So by 1922, he has joined the Mexican Communist Society, and with David Siqueiros, whom he had met in Paris, Rivera, they together found the Revolutionary Artists Union, and he began a series of frescoes entitled The Ballad of the Proletarian Revolution, focused on Mexican society and the revolutionary past, that took him 6 years to complete. And it was in the 2 courtyards of the Mexico's Secretariat of Public Education building. So 2 courtyards, each one 3 levels. So it's just absolutely huge, 5,200 square feet of painting, right? So the larger of the 2 is the labor courtyard, in which we see works like this one, panels such as Liberation of the Peon, Mechanization of the Country, and this nice one called The Painter, the Sculptor, and the Architect. And who's sitting there kind of slumped down? Yes, that's Diego Rivera. He appears in lots of his own works. And in fact, he considered this to be one of his best self-portraits. By the way, he would paint at this point small hammers and sickles next to his signature on the panels in the building. Here he is with another cool hat next to one of them. Let's see, in the smaller courtyard, the festival courtyard, there we go. I think this is a really interesting example of how he works. I love the way the painting flows right around the architectural elements, the doors that have to be there. You even have people up at the top sitting on the doors. And the color harmony in this is just brilliant. And once again, it's typical of mural of all of the Mexican muralists, particularly Rivera, in that it's filled right up to the top. Every inch practically is used. And we see the mountains surrounding Mexico City up at the top. And it's really cool. So it's also in this courtyard that we find the one called the Arsenal here. So of course, that's Frida Kahlo in the center. That's David Siqueiros on the left, and way over on the right, that woman is Tina Modati, the photographer, and they're getting ready for the revolution. This is part of a series devoted to popular corridos or revolutionary songs. And on the top floor, he really gets into it. And he has all these images of decadent capitalists drinking martinis and carrying on, images that are going to recur in some of his American murals and kind of get him into some trouble. So in 1927, Rivera visits the Soviet Union to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of the October Revolution. And while he's there, he meets Alfred Barr, who was the director of the new Museum of Modern Art in New York, who had become a friend and a patron. And on his return to Mexico City, Rivera divorces Guadalupe Marin and marries Frida Kahlo. Whoops, what have I got here? Okay, and he begins a cycle of murals in the National Palace, an ambitious, as you can see, panorama of Mexican history, beginning before the conquest and continuing until the present. He began work on a series of murals for the American Consulate in the Palace of Cortez. Yes, that Cortez. This is the oldest civil building in the Americas, in Cuernavaca. This was commissioned by the American ambassador, and in the central panel you can see there is this thing called Crossing the Barranca. This is apparently, conquistadores chasing the indigenous. It's not entirely accurate, or something is amiss about this. I forget what. There we go. Now, it was in fact Rivera's relationship with American capitalists, such as the ambassador Dwight Morrow, that leads him to being kicked out of the Mexican Communist Party in that year. But it's at this point that Frida and Diego arrive in San Francisco, and there he is recording his first impressions. Now, despite Rivera's strained relationship with the Mexican Communist Party, he still was refused a visa to come into the United States until Albert Bender stepped in. So Bender, who's very important in the story of SF MoMA, came to San Francisco from Ireland as a teenager, brought over by the family of a cousin, Anne Bremer, who's a quite well-known painter, San Francisco painter, early in the century. But Bender became quite wealthy in insurance and began buying and giving away art. Many early acquisitions at SF MoMA, which opened in 1935, such as these two of our most favorite paintings, really, at SF MoMA, these two were donated by Bender. And he certainly deserves credit for helping a young photographer named Ansel Adams at the start of his career. But really, the biggest thing he did was to secure visas for Diego and Frida Kahlo to come to San Francisco. Now, although we are rightly proud of Rivera's 4 San Francisco murals now, his presence in town at the time was not universally welcomed. For one thing, many people thought that mural commissions in the 1930s should go to local artists. And also, his style was radically different than the local landscape-based decorative mural style, such as a work like this in the state capitol by Arthur and Lucia Matthews. Of course, because of the earthquake, the destruction of the earthquake, post-earthquake, there was lots of rebuilding and there was lots of mural painting. And, this is what they were used to. But Bender, quite rightly, quite cleverly, sponsored an exhibit of Rivera's mural sketches up and down the coast in various towns, getting people accustomed to his style. And if Rivera was unpopular with the bigwigs, the Bohemian Club bigwigs, he had a huge influence on local artists whom he met by the dozens. He and Frida stayed in sculptor Ralph Stackpole's studio, where many local artists met him, including a young David Park, which is kind of interesting. So the first mural he did here was the Allegory of California in what was at the time the Stock Exchange. It was originally planned to be in the lobby of the Art Institute, but it was moved indoors here, where Ralph Stackpole, the sculptor, was designing the really giant figures that are outside of it. So they work together. Now, despite the title, it isn't really an allegory because it's not filled with symbols so much as contemporary figures. Some of them famous, like Luther Burbank there, who's bending over a plant, and others are just workers whom Rivera spent weeks sketching out in the field. Even the enormous figure at the top, Khalifa, is an image of sort of the allegorical figure of Queen of California, if you were. She's an image of the local tennis star named Helen Willis Moody, whom Rivera got to know. They kind of tooled around San Francisco in her sports car, so they say. The mural seems to be designed to celebrate California's natural wealth and industry, although I don't know why the big redwood tree is cut off like that, but I guess that's logging and so forth. That's an important industry. But rather than a consistent whole, the mural is kind of a collection of parts, and that's partially because of the difficulty in seeing it in this vertical setting in a stairwell high up in the building. Design-wise, it has kind of a serpentine structure, starting with the miners at the lower left, through this trio of famous men there, and in a catalog of postures, through the portrait of young Peter Stackpole, holding an airplane, up to Khalifa at the top. This goddess at the top, Khalifa, in early sketches, she looked much more like Rivera's Mexican subjects, but since he got to know Helen Willis Moody, she took over. Now this other little inset I have here is a sketch of young Peter Stackpole, the boy holding the airplane. So he was Ralph Stackpole's son. But if you have seen photographs of the construction of the Bay Bridge and the Golden Gate Bridge from way up high, they were taken by Peter Stackpole when he was about 17. I guess they didn't quite have the environmental and health and safety rules that we do now. And he climbed up and took some of those amazing pictures. So this is our first Rivera mural in San Francisco. Another one is called Flowering Almond Trees. This one was done at Rosalie Stern's home in Atherton when Frida and Diego were house guests there. It was moved to UC Berkeley to Stern Hall in 1956, and I believe it will be back at SF MoMA for the exhibit coming up. So this mural portrays 3 children reaching into a lovely basket of fruit. The 3 figures are portraits of Rosalie Stern's grandchildren. Rhoda, Peter, and Walter Haas are there, and the little girl at the lower left is actually Rhoda Haas's imaginary friend. And here's a photograph of Rivera painting this mural. The photograph is actually by Ansel Adams. I wouldn't say it's one of his better ones, but it's interesting to see Diego in action there. So the third mural he did here, of course, is the making of a mural of the making of a city, the construction of a city, which is at the Art Institute. This was his first publicly accessible mural in the United States. Now, what's interesting about this, of course, is the presence of himself sitting up on the scaffold. Some would have said kind of mooning San Francisco, but he denied that. He said, well, that's just what I'm doing. I'm sitting there. Some persons took this as a deliberate expression of contempt, but my painting meant nothing else than what was pictured. I would never think of insulting the people of a city I had come to love and in which I had been so happy, as he said. Now, up at the top of this, see the big head. I wanted to show you that in close-up. And I'm going to show you the head of a figure by John Langley Howard in Coit Tower, in that image I showed you before. And so you can really see the similarity in how people are appropriating, in some sense, Rivera's style. So that's their first 3 murals in San Francisco. After a short return to Mexico, the couple went to New York, where Diego was given only the second one man, as it were then, show at the new Museum of Modern Art. The first one went to Matisse, the second one goes to Diego Rivera, of 5 portable murals that he made on site during the 6 weeks before the show. This is one of them, and nearly 60,000 people saw this exhibit. After this, they went on to Detroit, where Rivera was to paint murals at the Detroit Institute of the Arts. He spent 3 months touring the Ford plants there, preparing hundreds of sketches and concepts for the murals. He was amazed by the technology and modernity of Detroit's plants. And actually, the murals there are the ones that he thought were his best work. In October 1932, he was then commissioned to paint a mural at Rockefeller Center. And this is the one that caused a lot of controversy. Okay, so there are explicit communist sympathies in here. I'll show you close up. That's Lenin right on the right. And on the other side, he's got, again, these images of John D. Rockefeller with dancing girls and gambling and drinking martinis and so forth. And this kind of went a little bit too far. What he had done at one point was covered over and the rest was left unfinished, and the whole thing was destroyed in 1934, although fortunately Rivera used photographs of it to paint the replica, and that's what I just showed you, in the Palace of Bellas Artes in Mexico City. But with all this mural work he was doing, Rivera was always an active easel painter. All the mural artists did easel paintings. Often what they did in their paintings were scenes from parts of murals. Mural painters weren't paid a whole lot, so it was a way to earn some more money. And Rivera was certainly part of this. He did tons of easel paintings. Kind of actually took sort of a break from mural work during the 30s and did many more easel paintings. So I wanted to show you a number of them, because the exhibit that's going to be at SF MoMA really features sketches and so forth from the murals, but easel paintings as well. So he loves to paint Mexican imagery, the people, the places, mostly people in Mexico. And here the embroiderers, we can see that we've got the rounded sort of forms, kind of squarish rounded forms that you see also in Toltec sculpture and so forth, typical colors, Mexico, and yet it's very modern in the way that it's painted. So another one, Dance in Tehuantepec, again, calling on cultural practices, imagery of Mexico. I love this one, Man Loading a Donkey with Firewood. It is, what can I say, so formal in a way. It's so much about art, I think, as well as about an image of something that he wants to show us about the culture. I love the donkey's head. And here's a couple of stone cutter and the stone mason. So I love the simplicity of his forms, the roundness of his forms. Here is something that's a little bit different. The forms are outlined as well as they are. For one thing, in mural technique, when you're painting murals, the way they do it is to put down, it's on plaster, there's rough plaster, they put a sketch down, and then they put on finished plaster about as much as you can do in a day, and that gets the color on it. So the color is part of the plaster. So it really is best for sort of not really highly detailed forms, because they have to work kind of fast. And we see that in Rivera's work. This one is rather interesting. It's a little bit more almost abstract than what he typically does. But I like that one, Peasants. So he works with images of Mexican life, traditional life. And of course, his famous and his favorite flower, the calla lily, the flower seller here. This one, the Flower Festival, was part of his one-man show at MoMA, New York. In 1932, I guess it was. And this is interesting too. Again, it's so formal, the repetition of forms, the lilies up at the top, in calm, round, simple forms. And yet I think the braids of the girl on the right, the way they're joined at the bottom there, really shows that he must have observed this. It must be something typical that he sees there. All right, what more? Do we have some more flowers? Yes, the nude with calla lilies. That's from a little later. Just wonderful images. Yeah, and he does a lot of portraits. So he does portraits, we could say, of the common people here, Modesta and Inesita. And this is a child sitting on a petate. That's at SF MoMA. So I don't know why the image is so poor. It should be better, but it's not. So he does images of common people, certainly of himself. These are portraits that they did for an American collector. The one by Frida, one of Frida is by Frida. Diego did his, and it's interesting in a way how similar they are, both using the device of the little piece of paper with an inscription on it that is interesting. On the one hand, it kind of comes from a practice that the Cubists did, but it's also from traditional Mexican painting, when you have kind of a banderole at the top that says something about the painting. Diego. And he did portraits of sort of fancier people. This is Guadalupe Marin, his second wife. She looks like a very powerful personage, I would say, there in this wonderful image, where he's used the cool art historical device of a mirror in a portrait in a really interesting way, having it behind her reflect the back of her. And this is the fabulous portrait of Natasha Gilman. She was the wife of a man named Jacques Gilman, who was from St. Petersburg, Russia, but he moved to Mexico in 1941 and became a movie producer produced many films of the comic actor Cantinflas, but that's his wife. Is just an incredibly beautiful and sensual picture with, once again, his calla lily, sort of for him, the symbol of Mexico, we might say. I have another one here. Yes, there's a portrait of his daughter, Ruth Rivera, again with the mirror, although because of the color of it, it almost seems like a moon or something, but wonderful image. And it's also interesting to reflect the date of this. So we're talking about the 30s, and particularly the 40s into the 50s. In the United States, what's going on? Abstract expressionism. And so Rivera is on a completely different wavelength at this time. In 1953, wonderful portrait. The color harmony in this is just absolutely sensational. I thought you'd like this. I certainly do. An interesting image. And just so you know that he was kind of aware of what was going on elsewhere. Mexico, of course, in the 30s was a hotbed of surrealism. Native or Mexican artists, as well as lots of Europeans, came to Mexico, and surrealism, Andre Breton was flourishing. And so Diego himself did a couple of surrealist works, which in my humble opinion, this is one of the worst things he ever did. I just don't think this is his style, although many things about it and the way it's painted are typical of his work, I would say, but I don't like it. So in May 1940, Rivera receives an offer that actually was delivered to him by Grace McCann Morley, the first director of SF MoMA, or the San Francisco Museum of Art, as it was at the time. He receives an offer to paint what would be his largest work and his last one in the United States. And of course, that's Pan American Unity. Here it is, the day it was the opening of the installation that's currently at SF MoMA. So this work, giant work, was painted in front of curious onlookers at the Golden Gate International Exposition in 1940, which was held on Treasure Island, which had just been built. He had something like 15 assistants on it, and it took about 4 months to do. And the subject here is, according to him, the expression of the fusion of the two cultures of the Americas, North and South America, in the face of the destruction of Europe during World War II. And he said of it, the mural which I am painting now, it is about the marriage of the artistic expression of the North and of the South on this continent. That is all. I believe in order to make an American art, a real American art, this will be necessary, this blending of the art of the Indian, the Mexican, the Eskimo, with the kind of urge which makes the machine, the invention in the material side of life, which is also an artistic urge, the same urge primarily, but in a different form of expression. So he's captivated by the idea of the industrial power, and we might say even creativity, of North America, combined with what he sees are as the traditional strengths of the South. And that's what we see here. And as he said, he did not give a fig about borders. He thought that all America was one, in a sense. So I just wanted to quickly, you probably know about this, show you the panels, right? So there's actually 10 panels, 5 sections, upper and lower. So starting with number 1, this is Mexico's indigenous past with its many gods. And once again, we have the peaks around Mexico City. And number 2, which is really interesting, now we've got a vision of San Francisco and the woman in the swan dive. And he once said, Diego said, that nothing was more beautiful to him than a woman diving, right? She was actually a woman from City College on the diving team there. There she is. And that's up above. Below her, this is a man named Mardonio Magana. He was an artist, a peasant artist, described by Rivera as the greatest contemporary Mexican sculptor. He died in 1947. He's at work on a giant head of Quetzalcoatl, you know, the feathered serpent, representing the continuity of ancient Mexican culture, yet people there standing right next to him are more interested in the diver up above. And of course, down below in the lower panel, we have Rivera himself. He's in the mural 3 times, painting portraits of the great liberators, Jefferson, Washington, Bolivar, and so forth. In the third panel, so the center panel, has this incredible central figure, which really represents Rivera's whole understanding here. It's a combination of the Aztec goddess Coatlicue with a Ford motor stamping plant. So really the industrial and the traditional together there. And he said that this symbolizes the union between North and South, this colossal goddess of life, half Indian, half machine. That's what he says. And you'll notice at the bottom, yes, that's Frida Kahlo. She joined him a little bit later in San Francisco, and she was painted in once she came. And let me see. I have my magnifying glass here. If we look closely, you can see that she is wearing a pair of earrings that look like a hand. Those were given to her by Picasso. So if you're going to be in a mural, then you wear your Picasso earrings at that time. Behind her is Diego with the actress Paulette Goddard, Charlie Chaplin's wife. You know, they had a thing. And over, does this move sideways? Yeah. Over in the corner here, the man in the suit is Timothy Pfluger, holding the plans for the City College, San Francisco City College Library, where this mural was intended to be installed. Didn't happen, but what did I do? There we go. Okay, and the final two images, we have the diver again in number 4 going the opposite way, and it's over Treasure Island. Below that, a panel about that great American art form, the movies, which he thought, Rivera thought the movies were sort of like, kind of like murals that they could teach, right, in a moving form. He liked them a lot. And finally, the last panel celebrates the technological genius of the North. So the whole thing was made up of a rigid steel frame with screening on it over which the plaster was placed. So it was always intended to be moved, to be taken to City College. And in fact, it was sized in order to go on a truck right across the bridge and so forth through the tunnel. It is 73 feet long, 22 feet high, and the whole thing weighs 22 tons. So it's not easy to move. So Rivera's last great fresco, once he's back in Mexico, was painted for the Hotel del Prado in Mexico City. So in the center of the mural, we see, oh, this is interesting. The very center of the mural is a figure called La Calavera Catrina. So she was like a skeleton figure who parodied vanity. And she was created by the man to her right, who was a popular Mexican engraver named Jose Guadalupe Posada. His style was very influential on Diego Rivera. He's somebody who was at work in the late 19th, early 20th century. So on the other side of the skeleton is a young Diego Rivera, and behind him looks like his mommy, right? And this is Frida Kahlo in this beautiful portrait of her, which itself was based on this photograph of Frida by her lover, Nicholas Murray. It just never gets less complicated, it only gets more complicated in this world. Now, this really interesting work was banned for 9 years in Mexico City because in it, there's a character who's a writer who's holding up a sign that says God does not exist. Finally, Rivera did remove the inscription so that the work could be displayed, but he certainly maintained his own public commitment to atheism. And as he said, I don't believe in God, but I do believe in Picasso. So by the end of his life, Rivera, Orozco, and Siqueiros, all three, represented Mexico at the 1950 Venice Biennale. He engaged in several mural and mosaic projects in Mexico City. In this time, this one called The Nightmare of War, Dream of Peace, there's Frida in front of it. She was a model, right? There she is in the work. This was intended to accompany an exhibition of Mexican art to Europe, but once again, this was canceled because once again, Diego had included a little bit too much in the way of politics in it. He had Stalin and Mao present, and so they were not required on this occasion. So the exhibition was canceled, or at least his part of it. And he also did this. This is really interesting. In 1954, this mural depicts a coup that the CIA backed in Guatemala. One can see it's pretty damning there. I think that's Eisenhower's face on the bomb. That's probably John Foster Dulles. Now, this work was loaned by Rivera to the Pushkin Museum in Moscow in 1958. But guess what? It was put in the cellar for 50 years and was only brought out in an exposition in Moscow in 2018. The reason was that works by Mexican artists like Rivera were categorized by the Soviets as formalist art, meaning it was more about the way it was painted than the subject. It was considered not subject for public display for ideological reasons. I don't know how much more ideological you can be than this, but nevertheless didn't pass muster in the Soviet Union. In any case, Frida Kahlo died in April 1954. She was 47. There's Diego. He was beside himself, wept openly at her cremation. He fell into despair and aged rapidly, they say. He continued to venerate Frida Kahlo and regard her as a supreme artist, but this did not prevent him from marrying a fourth time in 1955. But 3 years after Kahlo's death, Rivera himself died of a heart attack in his studio. He was enshrined with great ceremony in the Rotunda de los Hombres Ilustres at the Dolores Cemetery in Mexico City. According to the New York Times, 20,000 people viewed his coffin in the Palace of Fine Arts, and 2,000 attended the ceremony, including a band of communists who held up a red banner in his honor. So, Diego Rivera, I think, a major and a monster artist, and I think we should remember him not just as a cultural figure, not just as the man behind Frida Kahlo, but for the incredible impact he had on American art, especially in San Francisco, where the mural tradition was so strong. And I think we should remember him for the beauty and power of his images that really brought Mexico and its culture to the attention of the art world in the 20th century. And finally, I think we should remember and celebrate Rivera for the superhuman effort it must have taken over and over again to paint on scaffolds, to paint on the ceilings of stairwells, to paint outdoors, and to do it all so extraordinarily well. So I want to finish by showing you something, I hope, I've shown you some of his early works that might have surprised you to know they were by Diego Rivera. Likewise, his final paintings, I think, would surprise you. And there we have it, his final painting of a watermelon. So thank you very much. Ooh, it looks like there's a bunch of comments and questions in the chat.
We've got some good stuff to discuss.
Okay.
But first, I just want to say thank you. It's a fabulous presentation and a great overview. It's going to be helpful for us as the exhibition comes to SF MoMA. I think it opens July 16th.
Yeah, mid-July, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it'll be open through the end of the year.
Yeah.
Really something to look forward to. It's going to be absolutely a big deal.
Yeah.
I'll start off with a question. I had you had that picture of his of Lupe Marin, I think his so they were divorced at that point. Is that right? They were. Yeah. So did he maintain good relationships with his exes?
I don't think so. I doubt it. But it just sounds like, given what he was like, I'm sure they were. I mean, look at how she looks in that painting, right? I mean, she's an angry woman, but they certainly were in contact. I don't know that he had good relations with her. They had a child, Ruth, in common, but.
So somehow he managed to get her to pose.
Yeah, he managed to. Yeah, I don't know how.
And I suppose they knew he, even if the relationship wasn't good, they knew his stature in the art world was important.
Yeah, I think so. And it was a small world, people.
Sarah asks about the Gelman, that picture of Ms. Gelman, and she notes that the dress kind of looks also like a calla lily. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. One of those great 1930s bias cut silk dresses that you basically can't wear underwear underneath. But yeah, she also looks like a calla lily. I mean, he's, even in those portraits, when you're painting a portrait, it's for a client and it has to flatter the client and be what the client wants, but he still has his own style and he manages to, make her also look like a flower. That's a really good comment. The famous calla lilies, It's
I had a person privately ask me about what's the process of moving a mural to other locations. Do you know much about that, April?
Well, yeah, I didn't put them up here, but I do, things I found off the web, some pictures of it being moved to SF MoMA. I mean, basically really slowly and really carefully on ginormous trucks, there are images. I don't know if they have them. They should. If they don't, they should have them displayed with the mural in the museum, because that was a major operation. And even, it was designed to be transported. It was designed to go to City College, but once it was there, it was supposed to be in the library. That didn't happen. Pfluger died. Then there was World War II. It ended up in the theater, and it was installed kind of permanently. So taking it down, not just moving it, but taking it down, it took them a long time to figure it out. And they had, of course, the world's experts on murals are in Mexico City, and they came here, people from SF MoMA went there to figure out exactly how to do it without damaging it. I mean, it's just a massive, massive project. And I should mention that SF MoMA paid for all this, not City College. And the reason it was moved is because City College is supposed to be building a new arts theater, a new arts center where this will eventually be installed. But I don't know, with the pandemic, I don't know what the timeline is on that, whether it's going to happen or not. I mean, I think it will, but maybe not.
I've heard it's behind schedule.
I imagine it is. What is not behind schedule these days? But so maybe, I think I read that they plan to have it at SF MoMA through 2023, but I bet it's longer than that.
I would love that. I do tours of the Salesforce Transit Center, which has really good views of the Pacific Telephone building, which was the architect for that was Timothy Pfluger, and Timothy Pfluger is in that mural. But also in that mural is the Pacific Telephone and Telegraph building.
Yeah. No, it's very cool. Yeah, so that's nice connection. Yeah.
And there's a big YouTube. I was just going to add this. There's a YouTube film all about the transportation of the mural, and the trucks only rolled on Sundays and only at 6 a.m.
Yeah,
because it had to go so slowly. It's pretty cool if you're into it.
Yeah. It's what people will do for love, right? For love of art.
And there's we've had him on our program. Will Minez is with City College and is kind of like the great champion of that mural.
Oh, he knows everything about it. He knows like 40 times more than I do about this stuff. But
you'll often run into him if you go to see the mural at certain times in the afternoon. He's often there.
Yeah, it's cool.
Let's see, other questions. Oh, someone asked, how many kids did Diego have? I heard about one. Was there more than one?
I'm not positive. I believe he had two daughters. There's the son that died, and there's Ruth. There was the one that was left in Russia. There was Ruth, and there may be one more. I don't remember actually, but not with Frida. But
none with Frida.
Lupe, yeah.
I thought it was cool that you've got that painting that has Walter Haas Jr. in it. Just noting that he was the owner of the Oakland A's for a period and a very important figure. And he was also, I think, CEO of Levi Strauss.
Yeah, just Haas everything in San Francisco. And those two boys also had their photograph taken by Dorothea Lange. So that's who the Haas's are. They they get involved in everything. It's kind of cool.
This is why you hang out with artists, so you can be immortalized.
Yeah, exactly.
If anybody has any other questions, feel free to, either put them in chat or, we're not a giant group. So if you want to just unmute and
Yeah, just
voice your question, you're welcome to do that.
What a great show, Miss Avril.
oh, thank you, Paco.
This is very high praise. Paco's like, we always love your thoughts on these programs. The most loyal of my audience members.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And I really love those artworks too.
Yeah.
Like in Diego Rivera.
No, he's an extraordinary artist. And it's interesting, as I said, San Francisco has a big mural tradition, largely because of the destruction of the earthquake and everything that was rebuilt after that. And at that time, like the Matthews, Arthur and Lucia Matthews, it was not considered sketchy to be a decorator, right? And to do murals, because they considered that a mural took more chops really than an easel painting. And in some ways it does, right? It's going to be seen from a distance, going to be seen up high and so forth. But what he managed to do, and I think in his easel paintings as well, are just as strong. I mean, his drafting skills and his sense of color and this form, the style in which he depicted people is fantastic. And as I say, when I think about it, when I think of what was going on in American art at the time, I mean, there were some Americans who still painted in a sort of a naturalistic way, but really everything was abstract art. And here's Diego Rivera doing what he's doing, and doing it really, really well. I think it's kind of interesting.
Such confidence in himself.
Yeah.
And then I think you kind of touched on this, just incredibly hardworking. Like, could the guy have been more prolific?
I know. Yeah. I was thinking this morning I'd look up, and I didn't do it, how many paintings he's considered to do. But, easel painting is one thing. How do you count a mural that's 5,200 square feet? I mean, I don't, if we have a figure for the square yardage of painting, say of Rivera compared to Picasso or something, I don't know. But yeah, he was incredibly prolific.
Yeah, I would love that comparison. I'd love to see, because of course they were rivals.
No.
Right. And so, yeah.
Could I add something?
Oh, please go ahead.
I present on Diego and Frida to classrooms, so 7th through 12th graders.
Oh.
And my knowledge is not, my knowledge and understanding of art does not begin to equal yours. I'm climbing that mountain. But one day I was talking to one of my mentors, and she said to me, I don't like Diego and I don't like Frida. And I'm like, what? And her line was, Diego is too unemotional and Frida is too emotional.
Well,
and I'd love to throw that your way, just because that's what a mentor said to me, and I'm still churning with it.
Well, it's like, to each his own. Nobody has to like anything. I would agree that Frida is very emotional. I'm not sure I would agree that Diego is unemotional, but the paintings are not about him by any means at all,
Right.
ever.
It's always about ideas, wouldn't you?
It's about ideas. It's about his view of history. And, I think the portraits that he did of other people, he did several of himself, but they're, yeah, I can see that distinction. I would say that she's probably right. To me, I don't care. I still like his work. Everybody is free to like or not like. In fact, I much prefer Diego to Frida. I think he's by far the better artist. But whatever, it's what people like.
He's the trained one. And I'm going to ask you another question, which is a little off the art topic, but let's see what you say. When you talk to me about someone who is, 300 pounds and not blessed with good looks, how did he attract all the women that he did?
I have no idea. Movie stars, he had affairs up, down, and center. I don't know. He must have had an extraordinarily charismatic personality, is all I can say. But yeah, I don't know.
I was wondering if there's any record about it. Yeah, because, does he often do everyone's portraits and that's how he wins them or something? I don't know. But yes, he must have been something.
Yeah. George Clooney, he was not. Let's put it that way. But because there's a whole group of handsome artists like Willem de Kooning, there's a whole bunch of handsome artists. He's not in that crowd,
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
And then there was a chat about the same thing. There's a chat question.
Yeah, can you explain why you like Diego's work more than Frida's? Sherry asks.
I don't know. I just think artistically it's stronger. I think he's the more competent artist, but it's whatever. Like do you like de Kooning? Do you like Pollock, right? I like Frida's work. It's really, really interesting. And I think the fact that so much of her is in it makes it so that many people can appreciate that and connect with her in a way. And I can see that with Diego, you don't necessarily. And also the communist flags and everything, like now, like really, this is what happens when you're too specific, right? Your moment passes sort of. But I just think he's a wonderful artist. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny because we look back today and he's basically kind of supporting Stalin, right? And we know that Stalin is killing millions of people while he's making these paintings.
Yeah. Well, you also know that during the 30s, there was a lot of at least intellectual sympathy with communism among Americans, particularly intellectuals and artists. And that's why I think Diego, he got away with what he did for a long time. I mean, at the Rockefeller Center, that's when it came to a halt and people just couldn't take that, or at least they couldn't. But, many Americans were attracted by the ideas of communism, but it's what actually happened in practice with Stalin and so forth. Then, things go south. I don't know exactly whether, like in the 50s, he's still making these crazy mural paintings celebrating communism. So I guess he didn't really move off that position too much. But yeah, that makes it, a bit difficult. It's like any artist of the past, as we discover more about them and we learn that they did things in their personal lives that we don't like particularly, or they said things or whatever, and how do you let that reflect on the art? You can if you want to, or you can also say, well, but I like the art. So,
I personally,
I'm not a communist myself, but I like his art.
You do live in Berkeley though, Avril.
Yes, I do. That's true.
People's Republic of Berkeley.
Yeah.
I think it's a time capsule and there's a value in that, and we can, we can go back, we can judge them from our point of view now, but we also need to kind of think about the times that they were living in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Well, Avril, I really want to thank you for presenting this, and it's always great to have you on Art Viewing Adventures. Very pleased that you'll be back on July, I think we said July 11th.
I think so. Yeah.
For the California ceramics.
Yeah.
And for those of you who didn't hear us say it earlier, that's got a tie to a current exhibition at the Oakland Museum of California on Heathware in
Edith Heath. Yeah.
Edith Heath. So and then maybe we can get you back and we'll do more of a discussion of the exhibition on Diego Rivera at SF MoMA after we've all had a chance to see it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for asking me. I always enjoy doing this and talking to your cool group. And so we'll see everybody at the museum maybe.
Great. Well, thanks, Avril.
Thank you.
You have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Thanks to all of you.
Wonderful talk.
Paco, everyone, be well.
Okay. Bye-bye.